We're continuing What's Next in Music 2024, and today we have a next panel which is called Gender Inequality in the Music Industry, what the numbers tell us and how to make a change. So obviously, despite the progress that we made as a society in recent years, gender inequality still remains an issue, especially in the music industry. And today we have two experts who are going to tell us a little bit more and perhaps provide some data and highlights about those disparities. And we're going to try and explore some actionable strategies for creating meaningful change. So we have two speakers today. Gwen, as you've probably introduced in the last session, but why don't you do it again for those who haven't been there before, perhaps?
Yeah, sorry, me again. So my name is Gwen. I run an organization working on environmental issues and also social issues based in France, but working internationally. And I'm here also with the hat of Key Change Alumni, so a program supporting musicians and music professionals from gender minorities in the music industry. And I was part of this program in 2022.
Thank you. Kamilė?
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Kamilė Čelutkaitė. I'm the head of Creative Europe desk in Lithuania. So basically my mission is to promote the program locally in Lithuania and to consult Lithuanian applicants if they wish to apply for Creative Europe funding, but also I talk about more general issues such as environmental sustainability and culture and gender inequality.
Thank you. And I'll continue to be a moderator, Tomas Paliūnas. So let's dive in straight into it. We have about 20-minute-ish presentation from Kamilė, who's going to present us with some numbers and data. So please, go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for the organizers of What's Next in Music Conference to include gender equality issue as part of the social sustainability topic. I think it's very much related to what we talked earlier this afternoon. So my presentation is going to be divided into three parts. First, I'm going to present you with some statistics and numbers from several different reports and surveys coming from different European countries on the gender inequality issue in the music industry. Then I will present my own research study that I've done with the supervision of my internship supervisor on the gender inequality in Lithuania's cultural sector, including the music industry. And then finally, I will present some ways how we could strive for more gender equality. And we'll present, and the main focus is going to be the Key Change project. So unfortunately, music industry, as I guess many other cultural fields and society in general, has a gender problem. First of all, so the Jaguar Foundation report found that less than 1% of the top 200 airplay tracks of the 12 UK radio stations were made by only women or non-binary musicians in 2020-2021. Less than 1%. Then the UCS Annenberg Initiative's report by Dr. Stacey L. Smith called Inclusion in the Recording Studio, examining 1,000 popular songs from 2012 to 2022, found that of the songs examined, only 2.8% were created by women producers, and only 12.8% of songwriters were women, which was the average across all the years. And only 13 out of 1,700 producing credits went to women of color. Really staggering numbers. Then, equally found that when analyzing the lineups of 38 Italian festivals in 2022, out of 775 acts, only 18% solo artists were women, with only 5% of bands featuring at least one woman in their group. So we had lots of bands, all male panels, let's put it that way. Then, Female Pressure Facts survey quantified the gender distribution of artists performing in electronic music festivals around the world, and found that the 2022 female acts represented only merely 26, almost 27% of lineups in 2020, 2021. And the non-binary artists accounted only for 1.3% in 2021. Then we come to the gender pay gap issue. So when we look at the labels, 3 major labels, that is Universal Music UK, Sony Music UK, and the WNIM Music UK, the gender pay gap, the average gender pay gap in 2021 was 31.9%. And finally, another dimension of gender equality issue is sexual violence, right? So sexualized violence in the European Nightlife Environment Report found that 46.4% of women and 30% of trans and non-binary gender identities reported having always or very often experienced some kind of normalized sexual violence when out at night, compared to 12% of 12.4% of men. So really staggering numbers. It's quite depressing to see all these statistics, but I feel like it's, well, painfully evident that music industry... Oh, sorry. That's the numbers. Thank you for showing me that I didn't change the slides. So yeah, you can take a quick look at these numbers. Yeah, so... In conclusion, we have a gender problem in the music industry. And unfortunately, my own research study that I've done with my internship supervisor at the Lithuanian Council for Culture, Kristina Mažeikaitė, a couple years ago, unfortunately, our research study kind of, is no exclusion. Our findings are kind of similar to the numbers we have seen. So I will just shortly present why we decided to do this research study, Gender Inequality in the Cultural Sector, the Economic and Emotional State of Female Artists. So since the Me Too movement and since 2018, gender equality has become one of the principal policy priorities in all policy fields in the European Union. And cultural policy field is also included. But in Lithuania, although Lithuania has signed all the rights charts, agreements, documents, where gender equality has been stated as one of the top goals and priorities, gender equality is virtually absent from all cultural policy documents in Lithuania. And we thought, well, maybe the reason why Lithuanian cultural field is quite passive regarding this issue is because maybe we lack gender disaggregated data. And we said, okay, maybe we could look at some statistics through gender equality perspective and see if we have gender inequality issue. So let's go to the economic state and findings on the economic states of both women and men artists. So on average, women artists earn approximately 200 euros less per month compared to men artists, which basically means that women artists need to work 15.5 months per year to earn the same kind of income that men artists earn on average. Of course, this is an average number. Gender pay gap varies greatly in different cultural fields. So we looked also at that gender pay gap in different cultural fields. So interestingly, when we look at the music sector, gender pay gap, I mean, we see some differences between men and women, but it's not that explicitly pronounced, which is interesting to see and to think of the reasons why. But it is also important to see, we later will see that gender stereotypes still persist in some form in the music industry, and in terms of emotional state, music is quite harsh sector to work for women. So I always invite to see statistics in a complex way and to see that, okay, maybe gender pay gap is not that pronounced, but still there are some other issues pertaining to the music industry. But yeah, gender pay gap in the music industry, as we see, is not as bad compared to some other cultural fields such as theater, interdisciplinary arts, or literature, where we see that men tend to earn way higher salaries compared to women artists. And just in comparison, we can also see other fields, cultural fields. So we see, for instance, that the gender pay gap is explicit, like is very problematic in filmmaking, architecture, design. And in general, we talked to, we did like focus group discussions with artists from different fields, and basically the conclusion they came up with, the reason why we have this gender pay gap is that because stereotypically women have lower self-esteem, and somehow they then, they agree to work for less money. Then it was interesting to see how respondents were agreeing or disagreeing with this kind of more maybe subjective statements about their economic state. So it's interesting that women were, they were saying that they are more depending on external financial support to create new projects. So, for instance, 2 times more women than men artists agreed with the statement that the income of their spouse or partner or parents helped them to create new artistic projects. And 1.5 times more women than men artists agreed with the statement that public funding is crucial to fund their new creative projects. But it's in line with the statistics of the fact that more women applied and more women got public funding grants for their creative projects between 2014 and 2022. But it was interesting to see the statistics in the corner, where in 2022, actually more men artists in the music industry received public funding grants. That is 83 men received public funding grants compared to 55 women artists in the music industry. And I think this fact, compared with, combined with the statistics about public, like projects receiving public funding, and the fact who manages those projects is very interesting, because actually between 2015 and 2023, projects that there were twice as many projects with twice as big budgets that received public funding that were managed by female managers compared to male managers. So this, I think, implies the hypothesis that perhaps in the music industry there's this gender stereotype that men create and perform music and women manage it and write about it. So let's move to the emotional state. How many minutes do I have?
About 5 or 10.
Okay, let's go. So, yeah, emotional state. As I mentioned, music is quite harsh, actually, sector for women to work psychologically and emotionally. So, in music, 28% of women agreed with the statement that they experience discrimination based on sex, gender, age, and other bases, compared to only 6% of men. So we see almost 5 times difference in terms of this statement. Then we have very saddening statistics about sexual harassment, experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace. Every 10 women responded that they experienced sexual harassment in music industry, in the music environment, compared to 0% of men, which is really depressing because, well, in the ideal world, it should be 0, 0, 0 all the way for everybody. So, but we don't have it right now. Then we have statistics about the, experiencing many conflicts. So in music, 18% of women said that they experienced a lot of conflicts in their workplace compared to only 5% of men. And then finally, basically almost every third woman said that they experience lots of stress in working in the music industry compared to 80% of men. So we see that, music industry is very challenging for women to work in psychologically and emotionally. Another interesting finding coming from those focus group discussions with artists was that actually for both men and women, it is quite challenging to combine artistic careers with the family duties, because somehow society stereotypically sees artists as, individuals separate from families, and for this reason there are like two implications. First of all, women artists stereotypically feel the societal pressure to leave their artistic careers and to, focus on upbringing children. And another implication is that, specificity of artists' work is that, they usually travel quite frequently, either in national borders or outside to foreign countries. And, if they have small children, they face this question of what to do with those small children. Should I bring them together with me, or should I leave somewhere, to my grandparents or whatever, to my parents? The thing is, usually cultural managers or public funding programs don't allow to include childcare expenses or child travel expenses in their project budgets, which means that artists should have their own financial resources, basically, to deal with this issue. In the long run, it can really become a serious obstacle for them to develop their international careers. So, that was an interesting, quite unexpected finding out of this analysis, qualitative data analysis. Recognition. I will just show you very shortly, visually. So the most important prize in Lithuania for your artistic achievements is this National Culture and Arts Prize. So in 30 years of Lithuania's independence, 3.5 times fewer women received this prize. I will just show you visually how it looks like. So this is all the women who received that prize. And that's men. So I feel like that just speaks for itself. So let's go to quick conclusions or recommendations. So we saw that dominant gender stereotype is that in culture, and I guess in music industry as well, is that men create culture. Men create culture, men perform culture and music, whereas women manage it and write about it. Then women on average earn less than men artists. Women still face serious discrimination based on sex and gender. And the emotional state of women is way worse compared to those of men artists. So general kind of recommendations would be we have to have strong targeted policy actions that would try to solve the gender inequality issue. Without that, I think we would not achieve any sort of big progress in this regard. But of course, the artistic community should be also very much proactive. It's very important that artists themselves would share the information. Okay, how much they ask for, I don't know, a photo shoot or I don't know, any other artistic endeavors, because women usually don't know the market price, you know, and when they hear how much their male counterparts earn, they're like, oh my God, I was asking for way more lower, I don't know, fees for my work compared to my male colleagues, and then they raise it and they see that, oh, it's possible to earn more money. But it's important to have this knowledge and this information. And then finally, artist unions should be also mindful about this issue. They should know, they should be aware of this issue, and also in their advocacy work, they should include gender equality actions and measures. Very quickly, I will present you another very specific project. A very specific project that wants to, that strives for more gender equality in the music industry. It markets itself as the global movement for gender equality in the music industry. It is funded by Creative Europe program, so it's very dear to my heart. Not only because of that, but you know, that included. So it has several parts. First, it's kind of it has this Key Change Participant Program, which is basically is focused on training, mentoring, and creating those showcase opportunities for talented, underrepresented genders. And another part is this global Key Change movement, which is mostly based on this Key Change pledge, which is, I think, a fantastic initiative. So Key Change invites music organizations, all music stakeholders, to sign the Key Change pledge to achieve at least 50% representation of women and gender expansive creators in at least one area of their work. And in 2022, there were 600 signatories. You can see the green dots. They were all over the world. I don't see a green dot in Lithuania, but maybe the situation has changed. I hope you can sign the pledge. And I will just show you a quick example, like, you know, what different music stakeholders could do if they sign this Key Change pledge. So, you know, festivals can commit to booking at least 50% of women in their lineups. Conferences can ensure that, you know, at least 50% of their speakers and panelists are women and of gender expansive identities. Orchestras could also pledge to achieve 50% target in their, I don't know, pieces they play, or number of principal players, and so on. Conservatoires can look at the students, lecturers, senior staff teams, and so on. Yeah. So you could see that there are many ways that every part of music industry, every organization can contribute to Key Change, to having more equal representation in their work. I don't know why the slides are a bit weird, but whatever. And just a quick slide, you can see that Key Change pledge actually works, because the reports found that 64% of the signatories actually are already achieving or surpassing their pledge targets. So come on, let's sign the pledge and achieve more representation in our work. Thank you so much. That's my presentation, and I will just quickly leave you with the QR code. Please scan this QR code, answer the question of this Musicature questionnaire. You know, next week, Lithuania's cultural season starts in France. Very exciting. And this Musicature is part of this season. So Kamilė and Shishi Band from Lithuania will travel in this tour at the end of November. And every evening will be will be preceded by the discussions with the audience and artists on inclusivity, gender equality, and so on. So they really want your input on these issues. So please scan the code and fill in the survey.
Thank you, Kamilė. That was good seeing the numbers, which very effectively highlighted the issue that we're talking about today. And so the question is also, the big question is, why are the numbers so low for women? We've seen 1%, 2%, these sort of numbers. So is it by design? What is causing it? And perhaps I'd just like to get Gwen involved in this as well. And what's your opinion on this? What's causing it? Is it by design? What are the reasons why the numbers are so low?
Well, from my perspective, the music industry is a very young industry, and it was male-made, and the boys' club is still there. So when you have only models that are mainly white male, which are now into their 50s, 60s, and that are still the main decision makers, it's very difficult to change. There are many explanations on why this is not changing, because on the opposite, if you look at all the education process, most students at music schools, at music masters, cultural studies, if you remember your studies, I still remember mine, I think we were 80-90% of women there, but then they tend to disappear. I've been working 20 years in the music industry. I feel really lucky. I had my doubts. I had times where I felt like I wanted to change career as well. But I don't have children. I'm pretty independent, and I feel like I don't have any issues. Like, I earn enough money to live, so I'm not facing many other issues that women might live. And there's also, as you said, like this syndrome of imposter that we face very much. I'm not saying that we are responsible for what's happening to us in the industry. And it's also a very difficult industry to work in, having to face so many issues in terms of, as you said, like harassment at work, sexual harassment, difficulty also to speak about those issues. We don't have also proper programs to support that. This is changing a bit, but we need more policies to force some changes, which will not happen by themselves, for sure.
Right, and there's some ideas as well that putting some minorities, let's say, in leadership positions might make change, and Kamilė, we had some data about that, so would you please expand a little bit on how the dynamics change if you put women into leadership positions, and how does it change their decisions in regards to other women getting more opportunities or less opportunities or the same? What are the dynamics?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, I guess on this surface level, putting more women in like leadership positions would set a role model for women. They would see that, oh, actually, I can also be, the producer, or be on the board on some charity foundations, or like on the major labels. So that would set like a positive example, and maybe encourage more women to strive for those stronger, bolder career paths for themselves. And what you mentioned is really, really crucial. That usually when women enter those leadership positions, they tend to adopt policies that are more considerate of women's needs. For instance, I think there are many examples in like big corporations that, they're not in the music industry, but still, that for instance, they decide that maybe there is a need for, a space for small children, when, for instance, you cannot leave them, in childcare facilities for some time, right? So women in leadership positions, they set the role models and they usually tend to make it easier for women to stay at the workplace. Yeah.
That makes sense. And we're talking about this, some 50-50 gender balance and some initiatives to do that. And I was wondering also, in general, there are questions about how do we achieve balance in promoting diversity, but without inadvertently displacing existing talent and creating some new forms inequality. So what would be your thoughts on that? Let's take Gwen's opinion, please.
That's a tricky one. I think Key Change is a good example because this program has been going on for quite some years now, and they were also rethinking their approach to this. And now they're also trying to look at racial discrimination and to have this approach, like more global approach about this, because obviously we don't want to reproduce some domination inequalities or domination schemes that we are facing. One way I think also about looking at things is maybe to switch from this 50-50 representation, but really to talk about money. We don't do that very often, and we always think that there's this glass ceiling, and actually just sharing and talking about that. And we also see that when women are working in the music industry, they usually have those jobs that are more connected to, let's say, care. So they would work in production, they would work with all the any links between music and social activities, or less in representation. So obviously increasing the pay for those jobs would also increase this pay difference. It doesn't necessarily mean that, because some women don't want to be a director, for instance, and it shouldn't be the goal for everyone as well. So having this approach of more money for jobs that are less paid or less recognized would also, I would say, change the perspective on that.
That makes sense. And Kamilė, do you have any other thoughts about this? How do we get more women in without inadvertently displacing others?
I will be a bit more provocative. But in general, when we say that, we seek for this equal representation, quotas, very radical, very controversial topic, right? It was interesting, like last year I organized the Forum on Gender Equality in the Cultural Sector, and Lithuania's Equal Rights Ombudsman, she explained that quotas, how they should work, really. Because I always get this question about, like, we will not discriminate, talents that are worthwhile, like, of attention and so on, recognition. So the way she explained me how quotas should work, let's put it that way. You have women and men, two people, right, applying for the same job with the kind of similar qualifications, right? And in this case, you choose women because of those historical injustices and historical gender stereotypes and historical gender inequality. But that's the case. So basically, she said that it should not somehow mean that we choose less talented people for the same position. It's that from the equally talented people, we choose women just because we want to restore this kind of balance, right? So that's how it should work in ideal
right, so if there was a qualification difference, then the decision is pretty simple, whoever is more qualified, right? But if the qualifications are the same, then you kind of want to give more chances to women and other minorities, perhaps. Yeah,
but also there's this more complicated thing, I think, because like when it comes to racial discrimination, right, or maybe women as well, like sometimes there are systemic barriers for certain groups of people to achieve the same qualifications, right? So there are systemic imbalances. So we also have to take this into consideration, that for some people it may be impossible to have the same qualifications. And then we have to make a more subtle decision, let's put it that way. Do we want, so based on our value systems, do we want to give a chance for this underrepresented usually heavily discriminated groups of people to achieve more. So that's my take.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking about the numbers, there was one number that caught my interest. There was like 12% of women are only music producers. It was 12%. So, but thinking about, I think it's also agreed that women and men have some fundamental differences in character and everything. So what would be the fair number here? For example, speaking about the producers, would 50% be the number? Would 15, 20, 30? Just thinking about specific about, let's say, music production. We know it's a little bit more, let's put it the word, geekier sort of job. Maybe that highlights the differences in men and women. What do we think? What's your opinion here? What would be the fair ratio? Do we still need to sort of aim for the 50-50, or is it lower? Is it more than 50? Where is the right balance?
Well, I would say it should be 80% of women and 20% of men for some years. That's to
balance out.
To balance it out, that's the goal. No, but I mean, I would say the most important thing for me would be to have equal access, equal opportunities, and then let everyone make their own choices of where they want to be. But just to have same payment and same opportunities, and to adapt a bit the way, because also we saw that during COVID. I remember that was really striking for me. There was an audition that was for a prestigious opera that was always happening in person. And the ratio was really small, like I think it was 10% of women and 90% of men selected. During COVID, this happened online, and they reached 40% of women and 60% of men, because the situation was less stressful, there was less confrontation, because you basically are confronted with, 10 person and mostly men judging you. And then, so it's also this way of how do you, from the beginning, like coming back again to this education, how do you also train women to be able to better speak for themselves, to be trained on how to negotiate your contract, how to negotiate your salary. All this is super important. And I'm a huge believer in mentoring programs. There are many now for artists, but there are more and more for technicians as well, and I think that's super important. And right now, on the European level, there are quite a lot of networks working on tech, and you can see that more and more are being led by women, and this is where a lot of initiatives are coming from. So
it makes perfect sense.
I'm hopeful.
Yeah, let's open up to questions. Do we have any questions, comments, insights? Yeah, one there. Coming. No worries.
Hi, greetings from Finland. I was listening with interest because, like you said, the entire project of Western art is a patriarchal project. That's why textile art has been seen as art and not crafts for only like a couple of decades, because men weren't doing it, so it can't be art. But about production, I think it's a slow change in a sense that the Finnish Copyright Association, their clients are 81% men and 19% women. And the change should start from like very early childhood and school, and like you said, role models. Right now, for instance, Warner Music Finland is run by a woman, and one of the biggest festivals in Finland, Province, is booked by a woman. And so the change is happening in Finland, hopefully in Lithuania as well. But what I was saying is it's also quite tied to a genre. I think there's a panel after this about metal music. So, because for my job, I'm a program manager for 4 different music venues. So, if I'm having, I've always said representation is good business, because then the audience also feel it's for everyone. So you have a chance to sell more tickets when you have representation. So I've never really understood the point of discriminating women artists. But I also do a couple of radio shows in Finland, and they are focused on new music, indie music, and pop stuff. And with those, it's like 2/3 of the songs we play are created by women. So, but in metal, not so much. So, I think, he's rubbing his clock. So I think I've spoken enough. But yeah, but it's a slow change. But it should start from the structures as well as not just like adding these quotas, but like encouraging women to operate on all levels of the industry. Yes, it was more of a speech than a question. Sorry.
It was a good speech. I like the part where you said that making things more equal actually benefits everyone, which I guess is an interesting point. Are there any more questions, actually? Insights? Speeches? Okay, let's explore the gender pay gap a little bit. It was mentioned a few times in the presentation. You mentioned, Kamilė, something about lower self-esteem. Can you elaborate a little bit more just why it exists in the first place and what are the main reasons why it exists, the gender pay gap?
Yeah. Why women have lower self-esteem than men? Let's think about it. I think I think it comes down to, like upbringing, the society, the educational systems, I think there are statistics, coming from different studies when it looks at the educational systems where I think there are statistics that shows that actually women, younger, students at schools, women, of female young students, they tend to outperform actually male students in those STEM subjects like maths, physics, and so on. But then something happens along the way, and because maybe they don't see role models, women scientists in those fields, or I think due to stereotypical social stereotypes, they're internalize this notion that maybe they're not good enough in those fields, and they choose, humanities or social sciences and so on. So I feel like it's very much based on that patriarchal system, that women tend to have lower self-esteem. They have, when you bring children, right? Girls have to be good girls. They have to behave. Boys can do whatever, right? But girls, they have to behave. They should take care of others. There are gender stereotypes so deeply embedded in our society that we don't necessarily we are not even aware, or we are not mindful about those ways. So, but there are other ways, systemic ways, why in certain fields there's a gender pay gap. Like, for instance, in filmmaking, I heard a story where directors of feature long how to say that? Long form films, feature films that tend to have the biggest budgets, the directors tend to be men. Women usually get the role of animation film directors, or short form feature films, which tend to receive way lower budgets, way lower funding, and so on. And I heard a story that when a women director went to the National Film Center in Lithuania, which is the main public funding organization in Lithuania, and she presented her idea for the film, which was actually then received many awards, and she's one of the most prominent filmmakers right now in Lithuania. She said she received the question from the commission of evaluators for that funding program. They asked, such a young lady, will she manage to deal with this huge budget and with such a serious topic of this movie. And then the producer who came with her, with the director to that conversation, interview, she said she also produces films of, male directors. And she said, well, they never receive such a question. Never. So I feel like the stereotypes, they are, they are everywhere in all, decision-making, who receives bigger funding or not. Then, for instance, in architecture, I know that many architecture studios in Lithuania, they are not that well organized in terms of their workflow. And the work hours sometimes are crazy. Like, they work sometimes, 12, 15 hours per day. And for women who have family duties, it's unacceptable. Like, it's just impossible to combine those things, this kind of work rhythm with the family duties. And also another thing, I was told that many bonuses in architecture studios in Lithuania, they're paid non-formally in envelopes, which is an issue for women with family duties, because they say, well, it's not formally accounted for, so my social benefits are lower, and it does not make sense in the long run if I want to have a family to work in this way. So there are some systemic, ways of work is structured that is not really favorable for women to stay in those fields. So gender pay gap, I feel like it's so many reasons why it exists. It varies from one field to another. It could be the whole hour dedicated just for this topic. So I will stop just there.
Sure, and it's a good way to wrap up this bit by bit. We're coming to an end of this. And just to close this, Gwen, you are having a successful career in the music industry. Your advice to women who are just perhaps starting out or already currently working in, any advice for women in the music industry?
I will have an advice for men. Educate yourself on that, really, because we're struggling enough that we need allies, and we need also some decisions being made by politicians on this. It happens in France now since 2 years. Every director of the music sector, so director of any kind of a venue, of any kind of any organization, has to go through a 6 hours training on sexual violence and harassment. And if they don't do that, they cannot apply for public funding anymore. And this made a big difference already. There were also gigantic protests with arguments that I felt like I would never hear in my life. But one of them, just to give you an example, was I don't need to go through this training. My wife is working for an NGO working on those issues. or some other coming to the training and saying, I want to train myself to make sure that I don't get accused of something I didn't do, which never happens, basically. So, or it's 0.05%. So that's my advice.
Kamilė, yeah, sure.
Quick follow-up for you, Gwen. So you said that's a rule now, that sexual violence training should be done by all directors of any kind of institution that receives public funding. I'm wondering, in the music industry, how was that achieved? How this regulation was, took shape?
There was a woman in place at the CNM, who's actually the president of EMI, so the European Export Offices also, and she took this decision.
Here we go. We need more women in those positions.
On that perfect note, thank you very much. A round of applause for our speakers here.